Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome to Modern Leadership, the podcast where each week we sit down with authors, entrepreneurs, and leaders to explore their journey, diving into the ups, their downs, and ultimately the lessons they learned along the way. Our goal, of course, is to show that everything is figure-outable. Today's guest expert is Steve Brown. Steve is an energetic speaker, author, strategist, and advisor with over 30 years of experience in high tech. He is the former futurist and chief evangelist at Intel Corp, helping others understand the business and societal impacts of new technologies and how they shape our future. But more importantly, right now, he is the author of The Innovation Ultimatum, How 6 Strategic Technologies Will Reshape Every Business in the 2020s. Steve, it's so wonderful to have you on the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Jake, and it's a real pleasure to be here.
Now, Steve, what the listeners don't know is that before we hit record, you and I were talking and we were kind of strategizing things that we wanted to talk about. And you shared with me these 6 strategic technologies. And we said, let's pick one and dive into it. But I heard all 6 and I said, oh my goodness, we need 6 episodes. This is so important. Before we get into that, though, give us a little bit of personal background to go along with that business intro.
Sure. So you can probably tell from my outrageous accent that I'm not from around these here parts. I was born in the UK, but I moved to the States in 1997. I was supposed to come for an 18-month assignment, but here we are 23 years later. I'm a US citizen, married to an American woman, and living in Portland, Oregon. So life is good. I've made Portland my home now, but I travel all over the world. So I speak to audiences big and small in Europe, Asia, all across North America. And when I'm not speaking and talking about the future and geeking out, I like to drink good wine, keep good company, and travel for fun. I have a personal goal to always have visited more countries than my age. So every year I have to add another country. And I've got a few in hand at the moment, but I just love exploring new cultures, meeting new people, and going to some of the beautiful places around the planet.
Boy, you and I have a very kindred heart in this thing. I think I need to go double my age in countries that I've visited. But let's talk a little bit about your role that you played at Intel, just because I think the name former futurist or a futurist at any company is really intriguing. Tell us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah, I mean, people have different perceptions of what it means. We didn't sit in a darkened room and smoke peyote and think big thoughts, right? That's not what a futurist is. You're not there to make predictions about the future. It's a fortune teller. A futurist models potential, possible futures by looking at trends, and that's everything from technology trends, as you'd expect, because they're so such a disruptive force. Business trends, how things get paid for. How it changes business models and so on. But most importantly, people trends. What do people want? What are their relationships? What do they care about? What are they scared of? What are their aspirations in life? So when I worked in Intel Labs as one of Intel's 2 futurists, I was surrounded by my boss, Dr. Genevieve Bell, as a cultural anthropologist, and I was surrounded by social scientists thinking about people and putting people first and then figuring out how to use technology to solve their problems 5, 10, and 15 years from now. So that's what a futurist does.
And I think that's just an amazing role and opportunity. One of the things that comes to my mind is we talk about how big companies are kind of like the Titanic, and they see the iceberg in the way, and it just takes a long time for them to adjust and change versus a smaller company, a startup, or some of these smaller based businesses. Many of our listeners own small service-based companies, and they tend to be a little bit more agile and can move a little bit. But I love this idea of following what these futurists are really trying to predict and what they're trying to see, not fortune tellers, but looking at trends. And so before we jump into your 6 technologies, tell me, how can we take some of the knowledge that you have as a futurist and apply it to small business?
Well, some of the technologies I talk about, people think, well, I could never develop an AI-based da-da-da. Well, you don't have to. That's the great thing. There are lots of other small businesses out there using these technologies and developing tools that you can use. So, if you're a small business, you don't have an IT department most likely, but you will have IT suppliers. So what I encourage small businesses to do is to empower themselves with information. The more you know how to ask the right questions, and then push your IT suppliers and say, hey, I want a tool that can do this. So that all of these great technologies that I'm going to talk about, there will be people using those to help solve your business problems. You just have to find them.
And have you seen a shift in business? You talk about coming over here to the States in 1997 and working really in technology your whole career and writing about it, being really kind of hands-on. Have you seen a shift in companies like a GE or an Intel or a Google that have a whole bunch of arms to their company versus these smaller companies that are just more specific in what they're doing, more direct? This is the one thing, niche down. This is the one thing we do.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for focus, right? That's what it all comes down to, is these smaller companies are very focused on solving a particular problem or set of problems for a particular market. A big behemoth company is trying to often be all things to all people, and that can slow them down. There are some advantages in being a big company because you have huge resources at your fingertips, but you also have the constraints that come with a large bureaucracy. So there's benefits of both models, but certainly agility and focus are key ones for smaller businesses.
Well, very good. Well, we have very little time and we have so much to talk about, so we got to jump into these 6 technologies. Why don't you just lay out all 6 of them for us, and then let's pick one and dive right into it.
Okay, so first technology is artificial intelligence. Which is a completely new way of computing that lets computers learn as they go. Second one is augmented reality, which is, if you're familiar with virtual reality, that entombs you in a digital world. Augmented reality overlays digital information on your view of the physical world. So that's coming very soon and very exciting.
Now, let me ask you really quickly about that one. Is that kind of like Google Glass was a number of years ago, like the precursor to this? Is that what it's looking at, or different?
It's Google Glass done right.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So it's overlaying digital objects and information in your field of view so that you can still see the physical world around you, but there are things now populating that world. That's a very hard computational problem to solve, which is why it's taking longer than VR. And Google Glass was just a very early attempt that really didn't do a very good job of it.
How about our friend Tony Stark and the Iron Man, where he's got he kind of throws it out there and he's kind of walking amongst all the technology that's just, I don't know, is that what we would see as
That's
augmented?
Exactly what we're talking about. Yeah,
okay,
projection.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's super cool, and it solves lots of business problems and will change the way we work forever. That's the key thing about it, as well as being enormously cool and fun.
Okay, so 1 and 2. Let's go 3.
Yeah, those are 2, and those are the biggest 2, I think, in terms of their impact. Next one will be blockchain technology, which is a way of creating trust digitally and automating and smoothing and speeding transactions of all types. That will have pretty profound implications for the financial services and other industries.
Yeah, I was thinking banking.
Yeah, banking, mortgages, loans, the crowdsourcing of investments, but also creation of value in very distributed ways. So small companies will be able to use blockchains as a way to build value with employees that don't work for them. And reward them with cryptocurrency and tokens that are generated as a result of creating that value together. It's some really interesting new development models for small companies to be thinking about expanding their reach without having to hire a bunch of new employees.
All right, number 4.
Number 4, the Internet of Things and sensors. This is taking advantage of ubiquitous connectivity, very cheap computing, and very cheap sensors to enable objects and infrastructure to become smart and connected. And that lets you do all kinds of, it creates new products and services, makes your infrastructure and your business run more efficiently, and create new experiences for people. Kind of allows us to make the world programmable. because you're allowing the digital world to understand what's happening in the physical world and act upon it.
And as a business owner, especially if you have like a product or a recurring service, this is a great way to have a lifetime value of a client because, as their product runs down, the sensor indicates, hey, you need to ship or you need to go and update or whatever. And it can happen kind of automatically and cut out a little bit of the back and forth and you just ship the product.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many interesting business models you can build around that. If you imagine a smart connected washing machine that can automatically order detergent because it knows how often you're using it, that can alert the manufacturer when there are maintenance issues so they can call you and schedule a maintenance fix. So you're creating some value there. But also, I mean, if you can create an interface that doesn't have lots of buttons and dials on it, it's easier to use. If I can speak to the washing machine and say, hey, wash my underpants, right? Rather than have to fiddle with dials and buttons, that's a way better consumer experience.
We've got this, we installed in our kitchen, this sink that has a hand sensor, like you would see in like a public restroom. And I just love it. Every time you go up to do anything in the sink, you just kind of wave your hand and it turns on. I love this technology. Okay, so that's 4. Where do we go with number 5?
Number 5, in order to have all of this Internet of Things, and we're moving towards a world of 100 trillion sensors and 100 billion connected devices by the end of this decade, to connect it all together, you need a network. And that's 5G and satellite networks. So 5G is, it's one more G than 4G. It must be better. 4G is what we have today. And it's going to be much faster, so 10 to 100 times faster. But also, it's the first cellular network that's designed for connecting things other than cell phones. So connected parking meters, connected cars, connected everything.
And I think this is a topic that I have zero clue because I'm looking at it and I'm like, my texts go pretty quickly. I don't know that, whatever the added cost or the added complexity of going from 4G to 5G for me is going to have that big of a impact. I look at, watching television on my phone or whatever, my devices. I'm pretty fast. I don't know that I can tell the difference between a 4G to a 5G, but you're talking about companies that a split second means the difference between potentially millions of dollars, like the stock market and things like that can go so much quicker with this that they do notice. I don't because I'm just a simple consumer.
Yeah, it's going to be used by businesses to create lots of new experiences. And I cover this a lot in the book. But because 5G is much more responsive, you can start to push more things up into the cloud, which makes devices that are connected to the cloud intelligent but cheaper, because a lot of that intelligence has been pushed up into the cloud. And the responsiveness allows you to feel like the intelligence is in the local device, but actually is a long way away. So you're going to see, and there's more security layers, more flexibility. I mean, you can imagine ambulances that have scanners in the ambulances that can communicate and share x-rays and scan data to the hospital as patients are on the way. Being in a stadium watching a sports game and having video streamed to your phone from multiple angles, and that video only being available to people inside the stadium because you can geofence it. There's all kinds of really cool things that 5G will bring. But if you're in rural areas, not so much, right? You're not going to get 5G anytime soon. So that's why satellite constellations are so important. In the next 10 years, actually in the next 5 years, we're going to put more satellites into orbit than in all of human history.
Oh, wow.
And many of those satellites will be used to blanket the Earth in high-speed communication. So you'll be able to get a signal anywhere on the planet. That means that the next 4 billion people will potentially be coming online this decade. So be thinking about, as a business, how do you expand your market to reach those next 4 billion customers?
Wow. And our final one.
Final one is autonomous machines. So taking artificial intelligence and using it to control machines and help them to navigate their way through the world. That's everything from smart robots to autonomous vehicles, drones, cobots, which are collaborative robots, autonomous trains, ships, and ultimately even planes, perhaps, completely changing the way that humans move around the planet.
Now, Steve, you and I talked. I'm a lawyer by trade. I do estate planning. I do wills, trusts. I do powers of attorney. A lot of this stuff is probably going to be taken away in the future by artificial intelligence. And I want to go down that path and talk a little bit about blue collar versus white collar when it comes to artificial intelligence and some of this augmented reality. But my thought for another type of law, personal injury lawyers are really concerned right now about autonomous driving vehicles, because if we take all the car accidents off the road, it evaporates all this work for these personal injury lawyers. So as you look at what you've learned and studied over these years, how soon are we until some of this autonomous vehicles, specifically cars, comes out, is ready for us, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the technology's close. And it's not so much the technology that's limiting this now, but liability issues, and thinking about if inevitably, there will be accidents. Hopefully there'll be far fewer accidents than with humans behind the wheel. And that's a big reason to make this transition. But you're going to get accidents. And when that happens, figuring out who gets sued is still being worked out. But the studies I'm seeing, the price parity, or the price difference between what I would call now a dumb car and a smart self-driving car, that needs to drop below about $1,000 or a couple of $1,000 before it becomes mainstream. And that looks to happen towards the end of this decade. And then you'll see a major transition happen, so that by 2040, the vast majority of cars on the road are predicted to be fully autonomous.
At the time that we're recording this episode, there's an ad that Burger King is putting out where the autonomous car drives up and stops at the Burger King because it sees the Burger King sign as a stop sign. And they've kind of made light of it a little bit. But, that's the reality that we've got to kind of work out, not just the physical ability to do it, but also social acceptance and things like that. But now let's go back to what I'm most interested in. And that is, as a lawyer, I'm wondering how long it is until artificial intelligence destroys my law practice. And I was having this conversation with one of my coaching members, one of the businesses that I consult with, and they're a plumber. And they do a lot of installation of high-rise buildings, very complex plumbing, not just your rotor-rooter type of plumbing. And one of the things that I realized is my business, even though I've gone to law school, I have massive student loans, I feel like I've got this great education, I feel like my business is at a much higher risk of artificial intelligence than my friend who runs this plumbing business.
Yeah, and Jake, that's a common fear, right? People are always worried that AI is going to take their job. And the good news is it's not going to. And the more you learn about artificial intelligence, what it can do, and importantly, what it cannot do, what its limitations are, the more you realize, I think I'm going to be okay. So certainly there are some tasks that will be automated, but they tend to be things that you don't really want to do anyway. So I'll give you an example. I spoke to the International Society of Barristers last year at a gathering in Tucson. And I talked about an AI from an Israeli company called LawGeeks, LAWGEEX, lawgeeks.com. And they ran a test where they put their AI up against 20 human lawyers. And the challenge they set was to take 5 real-world NDAs from real American companies and look for the issues in those non-disclosure agreements that any good lawyer would not sign. They would strike it before they signed it. And the human lawyers worked at it, and the average human took about 92 minutes to go through those 5 NDAs and find the issues. And the best lawyer found 95% of the issues. Average lawyer found 85%. The worst one only found 63%. The AI found just as many issues as the best lawyer and was able to complete the task, the whole thing, in 26 seconds. Now, I told that story to the International Society of Barristers, a little concerned that it was going to be like me farting in church or something.
Yeah.
And they were elated, because no one goes to law school thinking, I can't wait to get into the office today and review an NDA, right? That's not what people went to law school for. So they're happy to be able to outsource that, offload that task, and focus on higher value, more meaningful, more enjoyable work. And I think that that story is an analogy for the way that many of us will see technology show up in our workplace, is that technology will be a partner that will offload the things that we don't want to do and enable us to focus on the work that we do want to do and that is higher value because only humans can do it.
I'm going to push back just a little bit on this one using that example because I absolutely understand what you're saying. And if I can charge my client, you know, $600 and I'll run this analysis and I'll give them a report and all I have to do is plug it into the computer and it's done in 26 seconds, that's terrific. But what I'm concerned about is that the client now, instead of going to me and me employing the artificial intelligence, the client goes directly to the artificial intelligence and cuts me out. Now, instead of paying $600 to me, they pay $400 or $300 to LegalZoom or Google or Apple or whoever owns now this piece of AI and cut out the lawyers. What do you think about that?
Well, that's the channel question, right? Who provides that value? Yeah, and I think it's smart for whatever your business is to be looking at these types of technologies to incorporate them into your existing practices now so that you can offer them to your customers without them having to break the relationships, the trusted relationships that they've built with you, right? That people want to come to someone local that they trust. If you force them to go to Law Geeks or whoever it might be, or LegalZoom, because you're not providing that service, shame on you. So I think that's why you need to be first mover in these places, embrace this technology, because if you don't, people will go around you, and you want to retain your relevance and use your relationship to maintain the ability to deliver those services going forward.
And you did a great job of explaining that. I will give you a little backstory to this. I actually knew that was going to be the direction that you were going to go because we did a model where we did an online service versus a let's touch knee to knee. And even though we offered the same product essentially at a different price point, a little bit cheaper if you did it just online versus, let's get knee to knee and talk about this, we still found that most people felt comfortable to come in, sit down, talk to a human, know that we got your back. It's not just some obscure machine running it, but that there's really a human checking I's, dotting T's. So that's a great one. Now, in our conversation before we hit record, you said, but there is something different that the blue collar, hands-on, really active working class people need to really focus on, and that's this augmented reality. So talk to me a little bit about what my plumber friend might need to watch out for.
Yeah, so the future of work, I believe, is augmented work, where we partner with technology to be able to do better, to get superpowers. Now, in a knowledge worker realm, that would be AI that helps boost our creativity, our intuition, and so on. In doing physical work, AI and augmented reality will play a role, helping to guide us to create a hybrid worker, which is a combination of digital intelligence and all of the connectivity and insights it gets from being connected to the cloud, and human intelligence and experience and insights. So imagine being, let's pick a robot repair person, right? They're going to work for the first time. Day one, instead of having to be trained on all different sorts of robots and how to repair them and how they work, what kind of things go wrong, they pick up a pair of glasses, they put it on, they go to work. They go to their first robot, it's broken. The artificial intelligence scans the robot, figures out what it is, and then guides them through step by step all the diagnostics that they need to help diagnose the problem and then fix it, showing them, open the back slot here, unscrew this, check these wires, and so on. So guiding the worker. And now you've got this hybrid of a human and machine working together. And over time, the knowledge and experience of the human grows, the need for that AI diminishes, but over time you've got this wonderful hybrid of the two, where even when this brand new robot comes out that the worker has never seen before, the AI knows and can guide them and train them in that moment. So it's almost like real-time training. If you remember the movie The Matrix, where they had to plug those things in the back of their head.
Yep.
It's kind of like that, only without having to shove things in the back of your brain.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we're not going to be shoving things in the back of our brain. I'm
No one
thinking
wants
that
that.
YouTube is somewhat a precursor to this. I was thinking a couple weeks ago, my refrigerator went out. It's a pretty nice refrigerator. I didn't think that it was broken. I didn't think that I needed to call a professional to come in and do it. So I pulled it out. I went on YouTube, I looked up the model number, and I found some videos where somebody kind of went hand by hand. And that's me watching, on my phone doing this. And what you're saying is in the future, I might be able to pick up a pair of glasses. Maybe I'll even connect it to a version of YouTube where somebody actually walks me through, okay, here you're looking at this, grab this screwdriver, turn that screw. A little bit more sophisticated than my current YouTube video, but YouTube preparing us for that future.
Yeah, and even more sophisticated than that, working you through it step by step. So an arrow points to open this screw, right? And it shows you a screwdriver overlaid on it, open it. And then it monitors, so it knows when
I'm ready.
When you've achieved that step, and then goes to the next step. Exactly.
And when I make a mistake, it says, no, not that screw, the one next to it.
Right. And going to your construction worker example, right, if you are a plumber installing complex plumbing systems in a high rise, you're trying to work off 2D blueprints from the architect and trying to figure out how to put that in, avoiding the HVAC system and the electrical system and mechanical systems. And it's a tricky problem. And there's lots of workarounds you have to do. Being able to visualize all of that in 3D by putting on a pair of glasses that shows you this is where the electrical systems will be, this is where the piping needs to go, makes life so much easier for everybody.
Well, and I can think of some of the workers that go out and are digging, holes or something, and they're looking for where the power lines and the gas lines are. My cable company comes out and they're going to lay a new cable line, and they know exactly where to put the shovel because they can see where the current electric is, even if a root or something kind of moved it a little bit from where they laid it years before, they'll be able to notice where it is currently.
Yeah, it's essentially giving us superpowers, in this case, X-ray vision, right? The ability to see through things, see through walls, see through concrete, and imagine and have it digitally drawn for us to show us where things are. And surgeons will use the same technique, right? They're able to overlay X-rays on the body, and it'll guide them to exactly where to cut and enable them to see what's happening in real time, which is just amazing.
This brings up a question for me as we think about specifically surgeons. I think back to the medical field a number of years ago. Everybody was a generalist, right? You went and saw your family doctor for everything. And then there was this shift towards becoming a specialist. If I have an ear, nose, or throat problem, I go see that specific. If I have, for money purposes or for whatever reason, that we become more specialists. With this type of technology, will this allow us to become more generalists? Whereas I'm a surgeon, now instead of just being a knee surgeon, I can just put on glasses and be a shoulder surgeon, an elbow surgeon, a toe surgeon, whatever it may be. Will it swing us back that way?
I'm not sure it'll take people that far, because there's a lot more than just being able to be guided as a surgeon. There's lots of specialist techniques you need to learn. I have a lot of surgeon friends. But I think it does make surgeons more efficient, effective, and make them less mistakes. Because today the model, when you're in surgery, you've got the patient in front of you. Typically, there'll be some imaging of that patient, but it's up and to the left or up and to the right. So they're constantly looking at the X-ray or looking at the CT scan, and then back to the patient, then away, and then back to the patient, and away. And they're trying to model in their head, put those two things together. Augmented reality already brings those together and will make things far more accurate and far more efficient.
Well, and then I think to our Iron Man scene where he's in the helmet and he can kind of see everything, and that's really what we're hoping for in the future. Steve, this is one of the most fascinating conversations. I got to tell you, I'm geeking out here. I could go a couple of hours, honestly, just talking about each one of these 6 technologies. But the truth is, I need to go pick up your book. I need to read through it and then have this conversation again with you. So at this point, let's shift gears a little bit and dive into a section I call Learning from Leaders. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
All right. In this section, we ask 4 questions. The first one is, the book currently on your Kindle or bedside table, what are you reading these days?
I am currently reading The Master Algorithm, which is a nerdy book, but it's looking at artificial intelligence and its different applications and the different flavors of AI and how they solve real business problems in different ways. So kind of nerdy, but that's what I've currently got on my book stand.
Very cool. How about your leadership superpower?
I would say communication is the most important one I have found. Influence for any leader, influence is your most vital superpower. The ability to influence others and to get people to follow you. Simon Sinek is famous as saying, leaders only need one thing: followers, right? And the way you get followers is you influence them. And to me, the most important skill to be able to influence other people is great communication skills.
And I'm glad that you said that. We've actually, this is the Modern Leadership Podcast, but we talk as leadership being influence. And one of the courses that I offer is the CIA of influence: conviction, irresistibility, accountability. The CIA of influence is leadership. All right. How about a motivational quote, philosophy, or mantra that you live by, Steve?
I live in the world of the future. Right? I have done since I was a little kid, actually. I've always been fascinated by the future and visioning, and I think it's really important. Vision matters, is part of it. Every company, every person, I think, needs a vision for where they want to go. But I think the one that really sticks with me is that every strategy is only as good as its execution. You can have a great plan and a great vision for the future, but if you don't have a plan to make it actually happen, it's kind of worthless. And that's why pairings like Steve Jobs and Tim Cook were so powerful. Steve brought the vision, and Tim made it all happen.
Have you ever read the book Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman?
I have not.
So rocket fuel, as you are probably aware, combines a couple of elements that gives it more than just diesel fuel to give this launch. And this book, Rocket Fuel, really takes the visionary and pairs them with an executioner, or in the state of a Steve Jobs pairing with a Tim Cook, and how that is rocket fuel for your company.
I think it's so vital. I mean, and so many companies are missing one of those two. They're floundering around. They've got great execution, but they don't know where they're going, or they have an amazing vision, but they can't put any wood behind the arrow.
Well, I'm very excited to hear your answer to this next question, and that is the book that you most often gift or recommend to friends, family, and colleagues.
Yeah, the one that I've really enjoyed lately and that I think is really worth everybody reading is called The Future is Faster Than You Think by Peter Diamandis. And I was saying to you before we got going that when that book came out a week before mine. And when I saw what it was about, I thought, oh my God, it's the same book I've written. That's a bummer. But once I read it, I realized they're actually companion books. They do overlap a little bit, probably 5%, which means we're both on the right track. We're both saying the same things.
Yeah.
But anybody that enjoys his books is going to enjoy mine, and vice versa. So I recommend them as companion books. He goes a little further out in time and gets more speculative and has some interesting stories that I don't have. I bring some interesting stories of innovation in the future he doesn't have. I tend to be more practical, slightly shorter term. I bounded my book in this current decade.
The 2020s.
Yeah, that seemed to be most practical to me for businesses. They don't want to know stuff that's going to happen in 2050. What do I need to invest in now, and where do I need to be heading? And I also go into a lot more detail on the technologies and how they work. So, if you're curious about the different flavors of AI and what kind of business problems they can solve, you'll find that in my book. You won't find it in Peter's, but Peter will give you some additional great stories, really inspiring stuff on the kind of problems that we can hope to solve with artificial intelligence in the future. So two great companion books. Couldn't recommend it more highly.
Yeah, and I think you ought to bundle them together. We'll recommend them both to our audience. I want to pick them both up. The Innovation Ultimatum: How 6 Strategic Technologies Will Shape Every Business in the 2020s. Steve, you've been a great guest. Before we let you jump off, how can we pick up a copy of the book, and how can we find out more about you?
So you can find the book on all good booksellers, so Amazon.com, BN.com, Powell's.com, and so on. If you want to find out about me, you can't see me right now, but I have no hair. So you can find me at the baldfuturist.com, BALD futurist.com. You can see some of my previous talks up there. You can read my blog. You can learn a little bit more about the book and all these great technologies. Hope you'll find it a useful site.
Well, and as a fellow bald human, I tell you, you're wearing it well, my friend. Hey, it's been a blast to have you on. And thank you for coming and being this week's Modern Leadership guest expert.
It was a real pleasure. Thanks, Jake.
Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.